which line the shore. Since it is one of the oldest settled areas of the eastern United States, the state of New Hampshire offers almost any type of treasure an interested person cares to search for. Although this sachet or sachets have been searched for, there is no public record of anything ever being found. The story begins in 1720 when a company of immigrants sailing from Ireland to Boston were stopped at sea by the notorious pirate Philip Babb and his aide and cohort of Captain William Kidd. When the pirate was recognized, one of the women on board, Elizabeth Fulton, who was expecting a child, delivered it as the pirates were boarding the ship. For probably the only time in his life, Philip Babb was emotionally affected and asked the mother if she would name the baby for his dead wife. Willing to promise anything under the circumstances, the mother agreed. Babb gave her a bowl of expensive green cloth for the baby, then sent the immigrant ship on its way. The mother kept her word and named the baby girl Oceanborn Mary. The immigrants settled in the community of Londonderry in southern New Hampshire. The baby grew up here and married James Wallace when she was 22 years old. The old pirate, Philip Babb, had kept in touch with the Fulton family and sent expensive gifts to them during all of this time. Through politics at the time, Babb somehow managed to get a pardon and moved to the tiny village of Henniker, where he built a beautiful home. This house has been restored and is now a tourist attraction. When Oceanborn Mary's husband died, she and her sons went to live with the old pirate. It is a matter of recorded history that Babb was wealthy and probably buried part of his gold near his home. He is also thought to have buried large amounts of loot in the tiny island of Appledore, one of the group known as the Isles of Shoals. Babb was killed by robbers trying to force him to tell where his treasure was buried. There is little doubt that a large amount of his money is buried somewhere in the vicinity of the village of Henniker. If anyone searches for this treasure, they might also search for garnets. Several of gem quantity have been found in the area. It is hard to believe that gold and silver are in New Hampshire, but the four following recorded locations prove it. Lisbon has twice been a mining boom. In 1805, iron ore was discovered on Iron Hill in the Sugar Hill section of the township. This mining industry flourished until about 1850, when competition from the west ruined it. At one time, this vein of ore was considered to be the richest in the country. In 1864, gold was discovered in the western portion of the township. Only one mine was actually in Lisbon, but Lisbon was the center of the industry with several stamping mills in town. At one time, more than $50,000 worth of gold from this field was in circulation. Well over $1 million was invested in the gold mines and equipment. But as it drifted into speculation and lack of funds, the industry dried out. Slate, granite, soapstone, silver, and lead have also been mined in this area. Gold has been found near Dublin. In 1875, a mini strike was made and attempts to mine the ore were started, but the gold was in such small quantities that the enterprise was abandoned. Gold in small amounts has been found in the Lost and Pemigosset rivers near the state line of Maine. At one time, silver was mined in Mount Hayes near Gordon. A company was organized in 1881 to mine the Galenia discovered. A plant was started. Several veins were opened and considerable ore was taken out. But the price of silver at that time did not justify continued operation. But with the price of silver today, it could pay to investigate the old Mascot mine located here, the remains of which can still be seen. For those interested in searching for hidden treasure of the colonial period, the following two sites could be worthwhile. When war between France and England spread across the Atlantic to North America, French agents from Canada were sent to operate among the tribes of the Indians in the British colonies. Harnessing the resentment already felt by the Indians at the loss of their lands, these agents were able to stir up a ferocious hatred of the colonists. Supplied with French arms and ammunition, the Oregonians joined by tribes in a campaign of terror against the British frontier outposts that lasted 30 years. Often, the Indians took entire families prisoner. They were brought along with the stolen property the Indians had amassed to Rock Hingham, located about 2 miles from Kingston, where the whites were held for ransom. The English paid varying amounts in gold and silver coinage to gain the hostages released. Prices ranged from £5 sterling for a child to £50 for an adult male. In this manner, the Indians were able to accumulate a large amount of booty, consisting of jewelry and coins, for which they had little use. When the Indians were finally driven out of what is now New Hampshire, it is known that they secreted a large amount of plunder. One such believed location is any cave on the plateau called Rock Rimmon, near Kingston, located in Rockingham County. In 1903, a search for this cave was made and several Indian relics were found, but the cavern was never located. This is a good place to do local research into a local location known as coinage, colonial items, and Indian relics. Another location of Indian plunder is believed to be near Stubb Hill in northern Coast County. According to the story of several white prisoners that were later ransomed, after their capture, they were forced to march to Canada. While they were traveling, two Indians carried a large iron cooking pot full of loot, suspended between two poles. Just before skirting the mountain, Stubb Hill, the two Indians fell behind the traveling troop, and when they rejoined the party, the kettle was missing. It is unlikely the Indians ever returned to this sachet, since they had no use for the article and could obtain similar items on any of their raids. Even though it is not a recorded fact, the loss of a silver statue of the Madonna in the White Hills of New England in 1759 is still quite a mystery. The monetary value of this statue is not great, as treasures go, but it has an extremely high historical value. The story of the Silver Madonna began in the days of the French and Indian War, when the border conflicts between the French Canadians and the British colonists were at its highest pitch. Raids by the French and their Indian allies against small settlements in New York and New England had aroused the ire of Lord Geoffrey Amherst, commander of the British forces at Fort Ticaraga and Crown Point. Determined to put a halt to their border attacks, he summoned Major Rogers with orders to field an expedition of his famous Rangers against the Indian village of St. Francis in Quebec, a well-known jumping-off place for the raids against the colonies. Rogers' band of 200 picked men first rowed by whaleboats to the northern end of Lake Champlain, moving only under cover of darkness to successfully evade patrolling French vessels. Finally, Major Rogers called a halt one evening, 22 days out of Crown Point. Their destination, the Indian village of St. Francis, was only a few miles distant. After the unsuccessful battle, a group of Rangers rushed into the chapel, stripping the altar of its chalice, two heavily gold candlesticks, a cross, and a large silver statue of the Virgin Mary. The golden candlesticks were found on the shores of Lake Minnehaha in 1816, but no clue to the silver statue has ever appeared. Rogers ordered his men to march southward for home. They had been on the trail only a short time when the rear guard reported a strong force of French and Indians were coming after them. Many of the stragglers were caught and killed immediately by their pursuers. The group carrying the silver statue of the Madonna made its way past Lake Minnehaha to the Connecticut River. They were pursued so closely that they had no opportunity to stop and hunt for food. By the time they gained the banks of the Connecticut, the group was reduced to 4. Professing to know something of the wilderness country, led the little band through the great north to the White Hills. Here they crawled into the meager shelter of some overhanging rocks on the Perceptical near the Israel River. One of the Rangers suddenly seized the Madonna and hurled it over the edge of the Perceptical. Years later, woodsmen in this region of the Israel River discovered remnants of the lost detachment. But all efforts to locate the Silver Madonna were fruitless. There is sufficient historical documentation to affirm that the Silver Madonna was carried by that part of the Rogers band which fled towards the Connecticut River. The Federated Writers Guild, a well-researched source of information on page 384, gives this site as being near Jefferson, New Hampshire. Also, it is certain that the treasure was never found. While this treasure may sound like fiction, known facts bear out its credibility. Somewhere on the banks of a small pond in New Hampshire may be buried a fabulous diamond necklace that once belonged to Marie Antoinette, Queen of France. Just prior to the French Revolution, Marie Antoinette commissioned the best jewelers in France to create an exquisite diamond necklace. Records show the necklace cost £6 million. As the Revolution became imminent, the necklace was sent to Canada, then a haven for exiled Frenchmen. There is no written account of what happened to it after that. In the late 1700s, a Frenchman with an Indian companion came down from Canada to settle near Nashua, New Hampshire. The two men built a hut beside a wood road that led to Pennachuck Pond. At different times, the Indian made trips back to Canada. While he was gone, the Frenchman kept to himself, only leaving the house for vital necessities or for a solitary walk along the banks of the Pennachuck Pond. Both men were extremely close-mouthed and took no one into their confidence. While the Indian was away on one of his periodic trips to Canada, the old Frenchman died in his sleep. Upon returning to find his longtime friend dead, the Indian seemed very grieved. He stayed at the house for only a few days, then left and was not seen in Nashua again for many years. When he did return, many former residents had moved away and only a few knew him. He went about inquiring as to the whereabouts of a string of wampum that sparkled in the sunlight. He told the townspeople that the Frenchman had been his caretaker and that the two of them had buried it somewhere on the shore of Pennachuck Pond, but he could not now remember the exact spot and had been unable to relocate it. The string of sparkling wampum that many believe may have been Marie Antoinette's lost diamond necklace was never found and may still be buried somewhere on the banks of that small, quiet Pennachuck Pond, although there is no way to make certain, unless it is found, that the necklace lost in New Hampshire is the one that belonged to Marie Antoinette. Records do show that her priceless necklace was lost during the French Revolution and has never been reported found. There are many sunken wrecks dotting the sandy and rock-lined ocean bottom around Star Island. One of the group known as the Isle of Shoals, off the coast of New Hampshire, and many of their wrecks are unidentified and of undetermined value. Some early records from Spain indicate a Spanish galleon had crashed on the eastern shore of Star Island around 1685 at a spot known as Miss Underhill's Chair. This galleon carried a substantial amount of gold coins, silver plate, and silver bullion. This should be an excellent spot for divers. Incidentally, the Gospel Church located on Star Island was partially constructed of timbers from this galleon. On the western side of the island, there was once an old fort, which was protected by 9 cannons. Though the cannons have since been removed, the area of the fort itself is a good metal detecting site for relics, coins, and the like. There were also marauding Indians on the island trying to overthrow the New England settlements in what was called King Philip's War in 1675. By searching the island carefully, some artifacts from this period might turn up. In the 18th century, Appledore was the scene of a terrible silver ship disaster in which several sailors managed to get ashore with a substantial amount of the bullion that had been aboard. The history of the sailors has been lost in the years, but there have been many cases of people finding silver coins on or near the ledges along the eastern side of the island. Smutty Nose Island is the site of Blackbeard's buried treasure of silver bars and pieces of eight. The silver bars are believed to have been the same ones found by Captain Samuel Haley. Haley found 5 large silver bars while building a seawall from Malaga Island. So if indeed those were the silver bars Blackbeard buried, then the pieces of eight are yet to be found. Records from Grosse Pointe show that in January of 1813, a ship named Concepcion, out of Cadiz, Spain, was far off its course in a storm and slid by Cedar Island and crashed offshore at Southeast Point, Smutty Nose. Her cargo of dried fruits, almonds, bales of broadcloth, and a treasure of gold and silver went down with the cruise. Considerable gold and silver was discovered shortly after the wreck on the low-tide shore. Also found was a silver pocket watch inscribed with the initials P.S. White Island, which is 1 mile southwest of Star Island, also holds treasure buried by John Quelch and probably others at several locations on the island. In March 1876, only one person survived a shipwreck of an unidentified brig that crashed behind White Island. The schooner Buckmere hit Duck Island in March of 1875, losing 2 of its crew and a substantial amount of money in a chest which has not been recovered. These are only a few of the reported treasures in the Isles of Shoals. Most of these islands are rich in history and make excellent sites for metal detecting, coin shooting, bottle, and relic hunting, and whatever else you may want to try. Just be sure to obtain permission, writing, if at all possible, to search on private property. and leave it the way it was before you did your searching. Lake Horace is just south of Weir, New Hampshire, about 20 miles from both Concord and Manchester. It can be reached by Route 77. The park is a community project, and permission should be secured from village authorities before venturing into what was sure to be a sea of mud. To those who scoff at this hot tip, we have seen as many as 2,000 heads bobbing up and down on the southern shore of the lake, and a like number of boats out in the middle. There are factual records of 10,000 visitors at Lake Horace on a 4th of July weekend. Fishing plugs, spoons, and spinners are fast becoming collector's items, said one writer, and there must be millions of them on the bottom of Lake Horace. I know I've contributed my share. How many steel, glass, aluminum, and bamboo rods have slipped over the side of the boat? I like to have the value in money of all the outboard motors on the bottom of that lake. There is enough ice fishing gear on the bottom of that lake to outfit several hundred winter fishermen, exclaimed another. All of it could be salvaged. How about the steel traps around the lake and on the bottom, said one Maine author. Steel traps are collectible, especially some of the older ones. A lot of guys have lost their whole line during an ice out. Yes, there are steel traps, fishing lures, outboard motors, and maybe even a few aluminum boats nested in the mud on the bottom of this picturesque man-made lake. All are worth salvaging. But there are a few other things. No one can even venture to guess as to how many bottles have been dumped from the end of a boat into the lake. There are bound to be some of the early Coke bottles simply due to the antiquity of the lake and the fact that booze was long frowned upon by the local park committee. Rings, bracelets, watches, and maybe even a few necklaces have been lost by swimmers and water skiers. One 4th of July weekend, a well-loaded lady's pocketbook slid over the side of a tipsy rowboat. It contained several pieces of jewelry and quite a wad of dough. It was never found. There are no treasure boats or ignates on the bottom of Lake Horace, but there is loot aplenty for those diligent enough to search for it. When the first stirrings of the American Revolution moved across the colonies, those public officials who were loyal to the British often found themselves tarred and feathered before they were run out of town. Not wanting to wait until things really got bad, New Hampshire Governor John Wentworth decided that he had better get while the getting was good. And so it was that he took his wife and servants, along with 7 chests of his belongings, and headed post-haste towards Canada. It didn't take Wentworth too long to realize that the weight was slowing them down too much. It was a painful decision, but he decided to sachet 7 chests along the way. After all, he could always come back and get them after the colonists were beaten and the British had everything under control again. To the surprise of a great many people, the colonists won their fight for independence. A number of the treasures sashayed by the Tories were never recovered, including the 7 chests hidden by Wentworth. One of the chests was reported to have been filled with $25,000 in coin. The other 6 with silverware and silver service for his table. The treasure would, of course, be worth a lot more money today. As far as it is known, the treasure has never been recovered. It is still where Governor Wentworth sashayed it, in the vicinity of Dunham, New Hampshire. John Cromwell was an Indian fur trader who acquired 300 acres of land and built a trading post on the west side of the Merrimack River at the falls, which now bears his name. He earned a reputation of cheating the Indians, and they became hostile. When Cromwell was warned that the Indians planned to attack his fort, he buried his fortune on the grounds and fled. The Indians burned his trading post to the ground, leaving only traces of where the cellar once was. The signs were visible for many years. Though Cromwell lived until 1661, it seemed he never attempted to recover his treasure. After a series of several mortgage foreclosures, his property was acquired by Henry Farwell and Jonathan Bancroft. It is said these men plowed up a treasure near the site of the burned trading post. It was presumed to have been Cromwell's, but some of the early pioneers contend this was only part of the treasure, the remainder of which has never been found. It may come as a shock to the listeners of this tape to learn that the ruins of desert towns in the West cannot begin to compare with those of New England when it comes to the number of abandoned dwellings and farm sites, some 150 to 200 years old and older. Hunters, fishermen, backpackers, and campers that visit New Hampshire are often puzzled when they find a well-constructed fence in the heart of a dense forest, built so solidly as a miniature wall of China, the product of pre-revolutionary Yankee ingenuity, once enclosed hundreds of acres of pasture land. It is almost impossible for the visitor to visualize cattle and sheep grazing in what is now tangled underbrush or dense evergreen forest. Hundreds of miles of stone fences exist in New England. The sight is not an unusual one. A few moments of search will usually reveal a stone foundation, the ruins of a barn, spring house, and well. Believe it or not, there may be as many as 5,000 of these abandoned sites in Maine, New Hampshire, and western Massachusetts. Hundreds more exist in remote areas that have never been found. So well camouflaged are they with wild plant growth. There was a bottle dump at every one of these places of former human habitation. A few have been located, and some fabulous finds of blown bottles have been recovered, as well as many artifacts of pioneer days. The surface has only been scratched. To those who have never visited the land of maple syrup, baked beans, and codfish cakes, it may sound almost unbelievable that such a vast number of abandoned farms and old dwellings could exist in the heart of a populous region. It is indeed a fact. One can find a dozen such locations near any town in New England's northernmost states, especially Vermont and New Hampshire. Diligent searching will always produce one of the older ones. The Mother Worcester sachet of gold coins is believed hidden or buried in a cave near Campton in Grafton County. Perhaps the Historical Society at Lebanon can help on this one. Their address is Lebanon Historical Society, 1 Campbell Street, Lebanon, New Hampshire, 13766. For anyone that cares to get into the rockhound part of treasure hunting, this location near Berlin in Coos County should be of interest. On the east side of Dead River, about halfway up a 400-foot bluff, is Jasper Cave. The cave, about 14 feet long, 9 feet high, and 6 feet wide, was discovered in 1859 by William Sanborn, and received its name from the large amount of jasper formerly found there, known to have been mined by the Indians and used to fashion arrowheads and other parts of weapons. It is probable that the cave represents a mine made by them for obtaining the raw materials. The vein varies in thickness from 2 inches to several feet, and is thought to have been the result of a volcanic upheaval previous to the Ice Age, when the glaciers tore out Jericho Gap, leaving the sheer side of the Mount Forest and Jasper facing each other, and this Jasper deposit is in a nearly vertical vein. Other deposits of jasper are almost certainly in the area. Another rockhound site is Gilsum in Cheshire County. Here, and in the surrounding area, turlimine, quartz, and small quantities of beryllium are found. At Hillsboro, at the side of the old Lottery Bridge, there is thought to be a secret cave located nearby. It is believed that counterfeiters operated in this cave, and that the plates these bogus money makers used are hidden in the cave or nearby. Mean and greedy. These are the two best words to describe Captain Sandy Gordon, a pirate who buried a huge treasure sometime between 1715 and 1718 on White Island. This island is one of the 9 small outcroppings of rock comprising the Isle of Shoals, lying about 10 miles off Portsmouth, New Hampshire. A Scotsman by birth, Gordon went to sea while still a boy. The first that history heard of him, he turned up as a ship's carpenter aboard the Porpoise, an armed merchantman commanded by Captain John Herring. The mission? To capture Argentine corsairs who were raising havoc with British shipping in the area of the Barbary Coast. It was highly irregular, but Captain Herring decided to take his beautiful 18-year-old daughter, Martha, on this mission rather than leave her at home alone. The Porpoise was not more than 4 days out of London when the husky young Gordon began to make serious advances towards the golden-haired young maiden. Captain Herring soon caught wind of this and told Gordon to back off or face the venom of the cat of 9 tails. The young ship's carpenter heeded the warning for a few days, but Martha's beauty attracted him like a powerful magnet. In fact, it was not long thereafter that Herring trapped Gordon along with the girl in the captain's cabin. The father was furious. Seizing the young seaman by the throat, he threw him sprawling against the deck and sentenced him to 72 lashes upon his bare back. In addition, he was clamped in irons and interred into the ship's hold for 30 days. When he finally returned to duty, Sandy went about his appointed duty quietly. But this was only on the surface. He was plotting a bold mutiny with certain unsavory members of the crew. As soon as the majority of the hands were ready to challenge Captain Herring, the conspiracy was ripe. Gordon selected a dark night when he was on watch. At a shot from Gordon's pistol, the mutineers seized control of the Porpoise, overwhelming Captain Herring and the loyal crewmen. The surprised master was hauled from his cabin and bound to a gun. The punishment that Captain Herring had so recently meted out to Sandy was printed in the young sailor's mind. Seizing a lash, he evened the score then and there with 72 strokes upon the master's back. After several such beatings, spaced 1 hour apart, the captain finally died, and Gordon threw his body overboard. At this point, Sandy locked Martha in the captain's cabin and forbid anyone to approach her. He gave everyone on board a choice, either to turn pirate or to be thrown overboard. The choice was easy to make. It was at this time that Gordon showed his greedy nature. His policy on this pirate ship was that there would be no division of the plunder, as was the custom among buccaneers. All profits would be his. One slight concession. Men would be paid wages 25% higher than those on merchant ships. Now under the Jolly Roger, the ship sailed for some time off the coast of Scotland, capturing several valuable prizes. However, the crew grew exasperated with Gordon's reaping of all the profits while they risked life and limb. So it was not unexpected when they rebelled against Gordon. As a result, the pirates set Sandy and Martha adrift in a small boat and let them roll to the Scottish coast. The two managed to find an old farmhouse as their home in a desolate coastal area. It was at this time that the rascally Captain Edward Teach, called Blackbeard, and a small party visited this lonely shore in search of food, water, and liquor. When Teach came upon Gordon's humble adobe, the latter did not have much to offer except lurid tales of his adventure and one-time pirating. "Come aboard my ship," said Teach, "and I'll see how good a pirate you are. If you're as good as you're boasting, I'll see you outfitted, and maybe we can do business together." Soon after Gordon came aboard, the pirates sighted a richly laden East Indiaman homeward bound for London. Harold T. Wilkins, in Pirate Treasures, relates that the merchant ship put a furious defense. Gordon fought like a wild beast with cutlass and pistols until the merchant deck was clear of defenders. When the prize was finally secure, Teach slapped Gordon on the back and announced, "Good work, lad. By your bravery today, you've shown me that you deserve to be a skipper of this prize. But mind you, all loot will be shared with the crew." Thus it was that Gordon renamed the ship the Flying Scot, and he and Teach set sail for the Spanish Main. This cruise was highly successful, with both ships being loaded with plunder. Eventually, the two ships parted company with an agreement to meet again at a future date among the Isles of Shoals off Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Following this agreement, Gordon set sail back to Scotland, where he dropped anchor near his coastal farmhouse. He went ashore in a small boat and returned to his ship in the darkness of the night with the beautiful Martha in his arms. She was bound hand and foot, a very unwilling passenger for this long voyage to America. On the cruise to America, the Flying Scot sighted a Spanish galleon and gave chase. As the pirates drew near, the Spaniard let go with a broadside, which was inaccurate enough to cause little damage. Meanwhile, the Flying Scot lived up to her name and pulled alongside the Spaniard. Grappling hooks were thrown to link the two ships. Then the buccaneers swarmed aboard the victim like a host of hungry hornets. Gordon played it safe and stood on his quarterdeck until his men had the situation well in hand. Now the time had come for him to leap aboard the merchantman and take the Spanish captain as his prisoner. Perhaps he had hoped that some of his more obnoxious crew would not survive the assault. The galleon's captain proved to be a very stubborn individual, but after a highly persuasive measure, he revealed the amount of treasure on board and the secret places which most of it was stored. Then he was thrown overboard. The historical writer Charles B. Driscoll, in doubloons, stated that a careful check of the treasure showed that Sandy Gordon was indeed a wealthy man. He took more than $1 million worth of gold and silver out of the Spanish vessel. The Flying Scot arrived at the Isles of Shoals several weeks before Captain Teach. Landing at Star Island, Gordon ordered a division of the treasure to be made. When this was accomplished, the crew broke up into several small groups to bury their shares of loot. The noted New England historian Samuel Adams Drake had this to say of these pirates: "A short life and a merry one was the careless motto of these wild rovers of the main. What had they to fear? It is true, a colony law forbid the harboring of pirates. But the islanders were scarcely less lawless than the freebooters themselves. They considered themselves beyond reach of the arm of the law, and when in their turn looked on as a people apart from the body politic. No one would have betrayed the presence of those who scattered gold so freely among them. Like the ancient Greeks, the name of the pirates had no terrors for these rude islanders. What of the Captain Gordon and fair Martha? They took up residence a short distance away on White Island. Sandy had a small cottage built for them there, and it was near the cottage that he buried his treasure. How much did he bury? It is anyone's guess, but most authorities agree that it was an amount of considerable value. Good luck while treasure hunting New Hampshire.